I walked in and the teacher said, grab my ass. And I don't know. I was like, okay. And I grabbed it.
And he was just horrified. He's like, oh my gosh, this is not at all.
Because someone can put their leg all up in your crotch and touch your ass, and you could be like, let's keep going. But the minute you feel inside, I don't know how I felt about that, then the boundary has been crossed. All right, Melody.
Back.
Glad
Here
to
we
be
are
back
again.
here for another day, another
Yes.
tango topic.
Oh, I think this one is, it's a big one.
Oh.
Well, it's a big one for any community. But I also think in tango in particular, I mean, we've been around for a while and these kind of issues come up. Every once in a while, it pokes its head up and we all have to go like, what do we think about this? How
Right.
can we deal with it? So I think this is a really valuable conversation.
And I think what makes it so challenging is it's really difficult to define.
Yes.
We dance a very intimate physical dance. We are most times touching body to body, chest to chest. We move coordinated, usually typically in the same direction. So our legs move together. Our pelvis area hopefully has space. But either way, you get the idea.
Well,
So
so there's a lot of
how-
reference in some classes to your genital area.
Yeah.
Martin and Maurizio, I'm looking at you.
And so the question is, how do we define our boundaries in such a social, intimate dance?
Yes, especially when it is a normal course of action in that dance to wrap your legs around one another, to maybe have moments that imitate passion. It's not that there's passion being shared, but like the pose
could
might.
be.
It could be, but generally, like the pose might seem like there is, boundaries in tango. Okay, this is where
do we start?
Start? Okay, well, so let's talk about maybe different social settings, right? Because in tango, obviously we start in a class usually. So we're in a class. There are boundaries in the class. What's appropriate from a teacher to a student, vice versa. But then we also need to talk about a milonga. What is appropriate behavior in a milonga
Versus a
practica. And then in the private practice space, when you're practicing with people that you may have a friendship with, but not a romantic relationship with. And often this is a man and a woman practicing together, but it could be two men, it could be two women. So maybe we need to touch on all of these different scenarios.
I'll take the first one, the easier one.
All right.
I think I'm just more aware of it now, entering this teaching space more often. So there's first the relationship between the teacher and the student, right? And you sometimes will need, it's very often that you're trying to show something, but then you also have to feel, you either invite the person to feel on your body what something means. If I'm extending and I'm activating these parts of my muscles, and I know in the beginning I used to be like, I would grab people's hands, and I probably still do it today, and just place it on my body, right? Because I'm very comfortable with my body. Didn't even think about if that was comfortable for them or not. And I'm like, hold me here, hold me here, hold me here. Do you feel this? Great. And sometimes then I might be, without thinking, place my hand on somebody's body. And typically it's like around the torso area, sometimes even the hip, sometimes around the chest area to indicate like, yes, this is okay, this is not okay. And I think for that, always, what it should be is, I would like to show you something. Can I touch you here? Do you feel comfortable with that?
Yes.
And sometimes maybe even asking is already like making the person feel like they have to say yes. And so maybe it's a little bit of slowly, first maybe just a light touch on the arm, for instance, to gauge people's comfort, because sometimes people don't say what they really mean.
Yes.
So it's both hearing the verbal response and the body reaction over time, and hopefully being aware of that and
receptive to that. Yes, and recognizing if somebody just stiffened when you touch them, go back off immediately. I will say, just as a funny anecdote, I walked into a class a little bit late, so I'd missed, 20 minutes of the class with some traveling teachers. And the teacher, I just have to demonstrate for those that are watching the video. I walked in and the teacher said, grab my ass. And I don't know. I was like, okay. And I grabbed it. And that was not what he meant. That was not what he meant.
What else could he have
He
meant?
meant put, like, on the sides of the hips. And he laughed. We laughed for a good 10 minutes about this. Okay. But maybe we have to be intentional with our words about, like, we're not saying, I mean, that was hilarious. And this teacher will continue to say, grab my ass. And that's who he is. And in our relationship, that's totally fine. But we have a relationship that goes back 10 years. I don't think he would say that to a brand new student. Because he would be able to judge what was appropriate in that. I do think we also have to know, let's say you do have a teacher that's a bit more mature and a young novice student. And typically there's an age gap as well. I would say that it's not a good course of action to try to involve yourself romantically with that student. Even though this is tango, this isn't university, but there still is, a sense of authority with the teacher, right? And we have college clubs where we have older adults teaching college students. So I think we have to be really mindful of that.
Right.
And
the piece you said about the authority is a very tough one because that happens a lot, even outside of the class perspective, but where the teacher has this elevated role and it becomes challenging to express when something doesn't feel okay. And I know I think the best thing anyone can do is, I think there's a huge responsibility on anybody who is in a position of power to be very mindful of their behavior and their and how they might be perceived, and to constantly check in with people and what they're comfortable with. I think is also the responsibility of all of us to communicate what we want at any given point. It's to say what we mean when we say something. Let me put it that way. It's our responsibility that when we say something, we say what we mean.
Okay. So yes and no.
Say more.
So let's talk about, so we can talk about a class setting. That's a different scenario than a private lesson, right?
Oh, we didn't get there yet.
And so maybe we jump a little and we can combine the two, a private lesson or a scenario where you have two dancers that are practicing together in a private location.
Okay.
So it's going to be a very different setting than being in a practica or a milonga where there are lots of people around. I think that it's really important for teachers, and this may not be as easy or possible, I would suggest having a body double in that room for both people's production.
Can you explain what you mean by body double?
So body double, in Rotary, we have this idea that if you're working with children, you must have two adults present at all time. And this is for the child's protection and for the adult's protection, right? So that if there was ever any misconduct, that there was a witness to that misconduct, right? And we're not insinuating that people in these private situations that there is bad misconduct happening, but the reality is it can happen, right? And so if we want to minimize those situations, group settings are better, and just having a second person in the room for teachers is good. So when we're talking about, like, especially someone in authority being in a private space, we want to maybe encourage a body double, so have a second person in that room, or a camera. We have cameras in the entire studio. And I mean, it's more of a liability thing. We're in America. People like to sue. Also, because one of my pieces of wardrobe walked out of the studio with somebody one time. But it is also, we just hired our first male staff member, and I feel a little bit more at ease knowing that I have cameras everywhere, right? So, and it's not somebody that I think anything would happen, but I think, so there could be miscommunication, or even sometimes false claims can happen as well, right? So a little bit of protection there. So you can record if you can't have a body double. So both people can record. It makes a safer space. 2, this is the most important one, that if you feel when you're in this private scenario that maybe that person is indicating physically that they're interested in you, don't do anything. Just don't. Unless, and hopefully neither person is doing anything, because we're talking about being in a private scenario, and especially women, we grow up not feeling safe in a lot of spaces in our lives. So you may feel that you're getting messages from this person that they're interested in you, and you may even ask them if you could kiss them, or you may kiss them or touch them in a way that is romantic or should lead in that direction because you think you're getting signals. You don't know what their background is. You don't know what their history is. For some women, they freeze. For some women, they feel so unsafe that they think saying no could lead to an act of violence. So don't put a woman in that situation. Hard stop. That's it, right? As a general rule, I think we could embrace this.
Yes.
And if you do want to ask somebody out romantically, do it in a public setting.
Separate from the tango
Completely
space.
separate. Yes. So, and I'm not saying you can't date in tango. I've dated in tango, right? But usually it was that somebody asked me in a public space or maybe over Messenger, like, could I take you out for a drink? And it was very clear this was a romantic setting. And it was not that we were in a private setting in a private home and then they made a move. So let's just be safe and clear because we don't know what other life experience the other person has. And I'm saying woman because I think generally this is a burden that we're bearing in this current society, but I'm not saying it's only women, right? So I want to be very clear on that. So just as a general rule, let's just not do it. Period.
And I think that's a great advice because, like you said, sometimes it's not always a teacher to student. It could be two friends, two students, and so there's really no level of authority there.
Right.
But it's
Or it
still
could be a more experienced dancer with
to
a
a less experienced dancer. Exactly. Yes.
Yes. I do know when I started dancing, I was in situations where people asked me to practice privately, or they asked to go do other things that weren't overtly a date. It wasn't clear that it was romantic. And then at some point, they would make a move. They would try to kiss me or make a pass or ask me on a date. And they weren't people I was interested in, right? And so when I declined it, the attitude changed very quickly, right? And if I had been in a private setting, I don't think I would have felt very safe in that moment. So, but coming to it, I was already in a place where I tried not to put myself in that situation, but I don't want to place blame on the person that is being, it is not. I'm saying the appropriate behavior is just to not do it. And when you want to do it, let's say you are in a more public setting and you want to kiss somebody, I think it's personally kind of hot to say, may I kiss you? Ask for consent before you touch, right?
Yeah.
In that public setting first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Can I
What
give
about you, John?
I was gonna give a male perspective.
Yeah.
So a little story. This was oh gosh, this must have been 15 plus years ago. I've been dancing a couple years. I was helping out with a university class, so this was all young, like freshmen, basically. And we were.
And you were a master's student, or you had graduated?
No, I was still a student, so
Okay.
I'm not sure. Maybe a senior, maybe a master's student. So the age disparity between myself and the students wasn't huge. But in any case, we were doing a class on cicadas, and so I'm tall. I'm 6'4", and then I was working with this student who was. I mean, she was a short girl, and we were talking about the difference between a low cicada versus a high cicada. And sort of just biomechanically, if I'm doing a high cicada on someone who's really short, essentially my thigh ends up in their crotch. That's just what happens. And then I did that, and then she immediately was like, I have a boyfriend. And then I definitely had a moment of panic. I was like, oh gosh, this is not at all. I'm so sorry, what I was trying to do. And so it really stands out in my memory as like the first time where I thought, wow, this is a whole thing that I've been dancing long enough where I've sort of gotten comfortable with that amount of physical touch. But these are kids coming in who are they're American. They're used to this body, the personal space that we're used to, and so this is kind of a boundary. I certainly didn't want to make people uncomfortable.
I think what worked really well in that instance is first the student communicated their awkwardness, and then you accepted, you heard it, the challenge becomes, what if she hadn't said that?
Mm.
What if she kept it in? And what if you weren't paying attention to think, oh, my leg is going to go in here, And so having open dialogue always, like, we're going to practice this thing. It'll probably get a little bit intimate. Like, let's discuss how we want to do this and what we're comfortable with. I think it's okay to bring back talk.
Yes, absolutely. And say, you know what, that makes me uncomfortable. My preference is, I mean, I was dancing with a female follower, and thank goodness she said, "Hey, could you just move your arm a little bit more around my back?" I did not realize I was almost touching her bra. I but
Because your brain is trying to
my
figure out the
brain,
step and
yeah,
the
I'm just like, am I pushing her? Am I,
yeah.
and I'm grateful that she asked, because now I'm aware of it, and I'm
Mhm.
aware of it next time I'm dancing as well. And I'm like, oh, okay, I can't assume we're both women. Like, no, that's not welcome touch. I need to make sure that my hand is placed appropriately. I know, John, you touched on the fingertips before,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. And there are a lot of these things. I have a friend who told me this story where again, he was assisting in a class, and f- I guess he got bored or something. I mean this was in college. Everyone's a little bit sleep deprived, and he told me that he was kind of playing, like he was fidgeting with his hand on her back a little bit. And after that song, the follower gave him a dirty look, and he realized he was fidgeting with her bra clasp, and he was just
Oh,
horrified. He's like, "Oh my gosh, this is not
oh
at all."
no.
Yeah, so there's definitely, as a man, we're not. These are just not things that we kind of like talk about. And we never talk about this sort of stuff. Like, you go to a tango
Yes.
class,
Yeah.
this never gets brought up, and but we need to be cognizant. Yeah.
So, or
And
we could also, if you're on the receiving end of that, again, talk, not assume intent. And this is a different thing from somebody's making a pass at you, right? Or like they touched your butt, right? Or something, which I have heard happen. I have heard of people grabbing a woman's butt while she was in a leg wrap, for example, which
oh,
is just not appropriate behavior, right? But this is tango. We are humans. There are going to be some bad actors. So, like, we're saying, okay, when you're trying to behave appropriately, but maybe you're just completely unaware. So if it's not egregious, we can
yeah,
assume
yeah.
not bad intent and bring it up.
And I think now in this day and age, especially with Me Too movement, there's so much more publicity and awareness and dialogue around this. Now today we have no excuse.
Right.
Before, when things were hidden, okay, maybe. But now today, I'm sorry, no excuse. Too many, it's too much. Unless you live underneath a rock, like
Yeah.
you should know. You should. But we talk a bit about the class setting, but what about the milonga setting? So there's also social pressures. And I've heard before sometimes like really horrible things can happen in crowds, just in public spaces.
Oh yeah.
That
Yeah.
people just don't even, other people are around and maybe they'll see it. And like, I think some woman was like stabbed 10 times or something on the street in a crowded area and people just walk past or something like that.
Yeah. Or my friend was on the metro in Paris and a stranger cupped her butt the entire ride. It was so packed she couldn't even turn around. So like they were taking advantage of this kind of situation.
Jesus.
In a milonga, I think, John, you had an experience, right? Where you felt you were witnessing something that was uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, actually, this wasn't even in a milonga setting. This was we were doing like a hangout outside of tango with tango people, and I definitely saw some inappropriate touching. I'll just leave it at that. And um, I saw it, and I talked to the victim, and I kind of just confirming that I did see what I saw, and it wasn't just sort of making things up. And I kind of asked her if she wanted to do something, and she had indicated she didn't. And this was a case where there was a pretty big age gap, and she was, this is college. She was a student, and I was a little bit at a loss of what to do. I wanted to be respectful to what she wanted, but I also, knew that this is not, it made me feel gross for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do we do in those scenarios, right? I think as organizers, community builders have a different responsibility. I mean, generally, a bystander, we all have a bit of a responsibility to stand up and say that's not okay, and I think that is difficult for people, or to share. I know I've heard of one that has a "Do Not Dance" folder and pictures of certain people that have been inappropriate, and they share that folder with other people that would do well to know. Newer people in the scene are like, "Oh, this one is routinely inappropriate." Um, I know when I bring my daughter, who's 18, and she is a young, beautiful thing. She really is. When I bring her into the space, I am
Yeah.
Mama Bear. And the second I see somebody inappropriate, I jump up and I interrupt it. I think we can do that as a community, right? We can, if we see something inappropriate happening, walk up and introduce yourself.
Yeah.
And then maybe pull the person aside that is the victim in the scenario and say, hey, you don't have to dance with that person. If you feel like it's inappropriate, and it might have been, you can walk away and
Yeah.
it's okay.
And we've done that before where at an event we pulled a newer dancer or female aside and we checked in with her and she said, oh, no, I was fine. And that can happen. And
Yeah.
maybe you want that
Yeah.
and that's totally okay. But I'm very glad that we still took the time to do that. And as and in that instance, we were, let's say, hosts of the event. And so we took that responsibility on ourselves to watch and to see what was happening.
Yes.
I know there's a lot of debate about this. To what extent a host for an event, how much responsibility is it on them? And I think if we choose to create an event and we're charging people to come to these events, whether you charge or not, but we're creating something for people to come to. It's like if I were to go to a concert, it's the responsibility of the organizers of that concert to make sure there's, like, let's say it's a big concert, to make sure that there's medic involved, to pay for the police. That's why maybe my ticket will be a little higher, because they have to pay for certain safeguards to be there. I think it's our onus as hosts and organizers to be aware of these things and to take action.
Yes.
I know sometimes there can be false accusations. I know sometimes there can be miscommunications.
Yes.
And you don't want to,
it can be
there
gray.
can be gray areas. You don't want to necessarily attack someone or ban someone because of a miscommunication, but you can still talk to the individuals. And you can do a little digging and talk to other people that you know that they dance with to see, was this a one-time thing or is this a repeated pattern? I think that onus is on us. And I know some people may not agree.
Yeah. Well, and I think, like, as a community, we need to be aware of the character of people that we put into leadership positions, right? And I do know, so I think we have so many amazing teachers in this area, but I also know that there were scenarios as a student that I felt really uncomfortable. I felt that teachers crossed the line in class in front of people, getting too close, inappropriately close. And still, 11 years in, I feel it was inappropriate, right? And I warn people. I do say, oh, you should go to these teachers. They are wonderful, respectful. And if they ask me, I will say, no, I don't recommend that one. So I think as a community, we all have a little bit of that burden, right? Yes, as organizers in our own space, we are committing that we will have a safe space. That if we see somebody routinely coming in, or we hear of this person is routinely doing these things, we'll ask them to leave. Absolutely, have your money back, please go. Don't come to our events, right? But saying publicly and stating it up front, like, let's ask for consent in a public setting. That's just going to go like miles to make the space much more welcoming and more comfortable, right?
And that also means that us as bystanders or or us, sometimes we could be accidentally even encroaching in on someone's space. So yes, it's the responsibility of the organizers. It's the responsibility of the person who feels, not the responsibility, but if you feel uncomfortable, and I think we talked a little bit about where do you draw the line. I think you draw the line based off of your reaction, because someone can put their leg all up in your crotch and touch your ass, and you could be like, let's keep going. But the minute you feel inside, I don't know how I felt about that, then the boundary has been crossed. So I think it's your reaction that sets what's okay and what's not. But also, I could be the one who, with all of my awareness, could be the one doing something that's not appropriate. And I think it's my responsibility also to, in any space that I'm in, to be aware,
Yes.
to
Yes.
talk.
Well, and if you're trying to lead like a gun show and your follow is like, respect it. Don't
And-
try to do it 10 more times.
And to pay attention to people's reactions, because
yes.
people may not say it,
Mhm.
but their bodies will say it. The
Their
body
bodies
does not
will
lie.
say it. Absolutely. Yeah. John, is there anything you want to add there?
Could I quickly just
Mm.
add? Sorry, John's already giving us the 5 minutes.
I know.
So, for instance, when I'm dancing with someone and I go into close embrace and I'm the one leading them and I see them push a little bit out, I open the embrace and I keep it open. Maybe a song later, I'll see again if it was just that moment. I'll try. If they push out, I stay out. And I know the next time I dance with this person, I go straight to open embrace. So that might mean maybe I don't ask them for a Disarli because I want to be in close embrace, but maybe I'll ask them for a Rodriguez because we can just be open and be playful or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
So we need to be responsive to people's bodies.
Yeah, absolutely. John, do you want to add anything there?
The one thing I do try to have the follower dictate the embrace, how close they want to be. Because I certainly don't want to force close if they don't want to be. Well, I don't know if the followers experience with other leaders, so I'm not sure that they're like, what am I trying to say here?
Like how much they're taking advantage of that to also tell you with how they take the embrace.
Right. So I'm worried that it comes off as I'm just being wishy-washy and what I want my embrace to be.
Oh, I see. But you're trying to give them the space
to
make that decision.
do what they need to do to be comfortable. Because I also am really tall, and they need to make adjustments or whatever to do this dance.
I actually think as a leader, it's okay to propose the embrace that you want because the certain movement that you're doing might require one embrace over the other. But then it's our responsibility to watch the reaction and see if that proposal, that invitation was accepted. And if it was, great. If it wasn't, then back off and do something else. I think it's okay.
So I was in a private lesson with some teachers. And actually, I think we were in that private lesson together, John. And they indicated that the leader should kind of make an invitation and it was all on the follower to then step into it wherever I wanted to because I was following in that moment. So if I wanted to go all the way in or if I wanted to come here, that was for me to indicate. And it was really just an invitation. And I appreciated that. I do try to, when I'm leading, do the same thing. I try to just invite and then that follower is going to go where she's most comfortable or he's most comfortable.
Followers, we have power.
Yes,
and we should use our power.
Yes. Well, and what if so how do you think a follower should react if they feel a leader is being
How do we communicate
or vice versa?
Yeah. I think first it's okay to start my hierarchy is first I will react with my body. I may pull my body away. I may put my arm from around to on the shoulder to create the distance or further down the arm. And if I don't feel like that's being perceived, I might say, hey, can we open the embrace a bit? No reasons. Can we just open the embrace? This would be very nice. Thank you. And if still that's not being heard or they did it for a bit and then they went back, it hasn't happened to me to this extent, but in that instance, if depending on how uncomfortable I felt, is it something that, okay, I don't like it, so maybe I just don't dance with this person from now on? Or maybe I really don't like it, and so I'm just gonna step out of the embrace and leave the person on the dance floor.
And that is okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I know we talked about rejection, right? But I think one of the reasons I've never had to leave a dance is because I've watched, and if I see somebody dancing in a way that would make me feel uncomfortable.
If you cringe when you're looking at someone dancing,
I'm not going to dance with them. Yeah. And I don't think that's snobby. I think it's just like, hey, I have certain boundaries and other people may think that's fine. They may be dancing tango because they're like, oh, it's sexy and this is me being sexy and that's fine. But personally, that's not the reason or how I dance.
Yeah.
Right. And how do we make sure we're not crossing the line? So we're judging their body, right? We're listening. But if especially you're in a practica situation, how does it feel? Say, how does it feel?
Communicate verbally.
Right? Ask them. Like, and I think Pablo does a good job of encouraging people that like this is a practica. You can work on stuff. if you want to go and dance like it's a milonga, that's totally fine too. But like, it is the space that you can stop in the middle of a song and you can say, "Hey, you know what? Could we try this? I'm not crazy about that." Or as my friend did, like, "Hey, could you just move your hand to the back?" Right?
And if you don't know, find us.
Yes,
And we'll
absolutely.
talk to you and help figure out how best you can communicate. Because sometimes it's like, I want to say something, but I don't know how.
Yes.
And find people in the space around you where you can have those conversations and learn, because you're not going to learn it in the class.
Yeah. And if you're dancing and you're like, I don't know. I don't feel great about that. Is that normal?
Is it supposed to be like that?
Yeah. Ask. Like, let's have a conversation. We can talk about it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we just
Well,
gotta
so I
talk
think
to each other some more,
we got to talk to each
but
other.
feel confidence that it's okay to follow our gut instincts.
Absolutely. And then we have to be really respectful of the fact that different people in the world have different lived experiences, and to be mindful to not put people into really uncomfortable situations.
Yeah.
Yeah. John, any last parting words here?
I appreciate everything you guys have to put up with to do this dance.
Yeah.
Set your boundaries, commit to them, and be aware of other people's boundaries.
Yes. And speak up. And if it can't be to the person that you feel is being inappropriate, then speak up to other people that can help you as well, because we absolutely will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we will.
Oh. So by all means, if you have things to say on this, leave us a comment or send us a message if you don't want to say anything publicly.
If there's something going on with you right now and you want some advice, feel free to message us privately. If we don't know the answer, we can find someone who can help.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. And we'll see you on the next one.
Till next time.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Staying Grounded. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and spread the word. We'll catch you next time.